I do know that there will be a couple of folks who couldn't make it because they are at the behavioral health conference that's happening in Nevada, which most of my team is at as well. So we won't have a full group, but hopefully fruitful conversation. I think Eli is being a show off with his background in Egypt. Eli.
Yes, it was an amazing trip. Definitely the trip of a lifetime so far.
Oh, I imagine. You're not there right now, though.
No. I just got up before Christmas.
Yeah.
We were gone for a month. We went to Israel, Jordan, and Egypt.
Oh, amazing. I gotta make it to Israel. I gotta go see my folks there. It's on the list of places to go.
And it's amazing. And I have a wonderful tour guide. If you ever need,
I will reach out to you because that
he is unbelievably amazing. And I've been
Yeah.
on a lot of tours. He was by far the best.
Yeah, they can make a big difference.
Yes, it does.
Good morning, folks. Well, it is 10 o'clock, and so I'm going to give folks maybe 2 more minutes to join, just in case, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Morning, Cheyenne.
Hello. And just so everybody knows, I'm going to help out with notes today, and I'm trying to get my screen set up, so I probably won't be facing the camera.
And I actually do have a team member with me, Cheyenne.
Okay.
To rustle up one of the 3 of us that are in the office. Margaret is going to be helping me with that as well. So please don't feel pressure.
Okay, perfect.
I appreciate it. All right, well, it is 10:01. Welcome everybody to our ADSD Olmstead Planning Steering Committee meeting number 2. I'm so happy that you guys are here with us. Oh, look at Corey, nice to see you after all this time. This is how we're going to get started today. So if you guys could tell me your name, what commission or community you are here representing. And then for those of you who were able to participate in the study session that we did a couple of weeks ago, was there anything that came out of that study session that you would like to address either today or at a future meeting? So how we're going to do this is I'll just go around because I have everybody's name on the top of my screen and ask folks to weigh in. And I'm going to go down the list. So Cheyenne, you are first on deck.
Okay, Cheyenne Pasquale, and I'm the planning chief with ADSD. And unfortunately, I was not able to attend the study session. So
no worries.
I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody else has to say.
Okay, perfect. All right, next up we have Eli Schwartz.
Hi, my name is Eli Schwartz. I am the commissioner for the person I am the commissioner on the Nevada Commission for the person who are deaf, hard of hearing, or speech impaired. And I have no comment right now, but I do, like I talked to you about earlier, if we could set up a date for the future, so that way we can plan accordingly from now. Thank you.
Thank you, Eli. And I have Julie Steinbach.
Hi, I'm Julie. quite good stuff. And I'm the chair of the Nevada State Independent Living Council. And unfortunately, I missed the study session, but I did look at the materials, and I don't have any questions at this point.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, I will be posting the study session as well as all of our steering committee meeting materials and recording today on the webpage, if I can figure it out myself. So, as some of you may know, I'm working with limited team members because most of our staff are down in Las Vegas doing the Behavioral Health Criminal Justice Summit. And so the updates to the website are not necessarily in my wheelhouse, but I do have a can-do attitude. And so I'm going to try and figure it out. Worst case scenario, they will be posted on Friday. So for those of you who may be interested in viewing that recording, it will be worst case scenario posted to our webpage by Friday. Okay, next up, we have Corey Ward.
Hi, my name is Corey Ward. I'm muted. All right. Hang on.
No, we can hear you, Corey.
Oh, okay. All right. So my name is Corey Ward, and I am in Elko, Nevada. And I just most recently served on the Autism Commission for the state of Nevada. And I'm a parent of twins that are now 30, both of who have autism. And professionally, I am a teacher and I teach science in Wells, Nevada. So just a little tiny town out in the middle of nowhere. So I'm very honored and happy to be part of this, and I hope to make contributions. I was on the a very similar committee for the autism commission years ago. So, and I worked with Lisa then, and we came up with a very good document that was referenced during legislation to help improve services for people with autism. So thank you for having me.
Yes, it's nice to be able to work with you again, Corey. Maybe I'll be in your neck of the woods when we do those community workshops later in February.
That'd be awesome. Dress warm.
Yeah, I know. All right, we have Chuck Duarte up next.
Hi, Chuck Duarte. I'm the Nevada Public Policy Director for the Alzheimer's Association in Nevada. I represent the Nevada Task Force on Alzheimer's Disease and also chair the Commission on Aging's Legislative Subcommittee.
And anything, I don't know if you were able to participate in the study session or not, but
I was, and thank you very much. No, nothing out of that. Thank you.
okay. Thank you, Chuck. And it's Duarte. Now I know. We have a Crystal Duarte that spells the exact same way as a member of our team. So I'm going to tell her.
Depends on what part of the world you're from.
Okay. What part of the world are you from, Chuck?
Hawaii. My great grandparents were from Portugal.
Oh,
that's cool.
that is on my travel list as well. It's Portugal. Well, thanks, Chuck. Okay, we have Diane Dorkeldson. Did I get it right?
Oh, you did. Very nice. I'm Diane Thorkeldson, and like most of us in this crowd, I wear multiple hats. For the purposes of this group, I am representing the Nevada Center for Excellence in Disabilities, the NSED, where I am the assistant director. I am also the chair of the Commission for Services for Persons with Disabilities, but officially,
if I would have worked for the university.
Johnson is the CSPD's rep. You'll meet her in a second. And I am the parent of an adolescent daughter who has neurodevelopmental disabilities. And that's me. I did do the study session. I thought it was nicely done, informative, and I don't have any thoughts coming out of that.
Okay. Well, thank you, Diane. I appreciate it. Okay, how about we got Kimberly Palma Ortega.
Morning, everyone. Sorry, my internet went down. I had to go on the phone. My name is Kimberly Palmer Ortega. I am the public health liaison for the Nevada Disability Council. And I'm kind of playing two roles here, one as a parent of individuals, and then obviously the council and the community statewide as a whole. And I was able to attend the planning study session. I would say it was more so of a listening session for consumers because it seemed like we had a lot of questions once we were giving the content out on what we were planning and hoping to. So I'm glad that we're going to be able to put that information on the website soon, because I have had quite a few conversations with people that were unable to attend, and they were really interested into what we're doing, where we're going. So I appreciate you guys getting that put up so that we can go ahead and share that information to others.
Yeah, no problem. And, you know, we're going to post everything that we do on that web page. So please feel free to like distribute widely that fact sheet, which includes kind of an overview of just what Olmstead is and how we're going about our planning process, but also includes a link to the web page where people can stay up to date on everything ADSD Olmstead planning. Okay, how about Cindy Swanson?
Good morning, everybody. I am Cindy Swanson, and I am on this group as a representative of the Commission Serving Persons with Disabilities. So like Diane, a couple of hats here. I am a social worker, master of social work, but I am now retired. So I just get to be involved in a lot of volunteer activities such as this. I am blind. I lost my vision 27 years ago. My husband and I have 3 sons. Our middle son is 35. He has Down syndrome. We live in Boulder City, which amazingly to me is called rural. So we are in rural Nevada, even though it's next door to Henderson, which is next door to Las Vegas. Regarding the study session, and I guess perhaps to the annoyance of some people, I'm going to mention this over and over again. I think that a lot of resources, a lot of energy are being put into this Olmstead plan. And one of the things that I reported at the Statewide Independent Living Council is my impression is a lot of work is going into it, a lot of work. And one thing I learned, Lisa said that her organization is process experts, not subject experts. And I thought that was really good to understand that. So it's all about the process. The thing that I mentioned at the study session is that the report discussed some of the things that the group learned, their errors from the previous experiences. And I queried why, with having learned those lessons, why we're replicating that, why we're not bringing more people to the table. And I expressed at the meeting that this is a golden opportunity to bring people like VR and education to the table. And so some of the folks explained why, and I'm still not buying it, I guess. I'm still not buying it. It seems like a lost opportunity, but I was also not the only one who questioned that. So 2 or 3 other people brought it up. Another thing that was brought up is, do we have any legislative representation on the this group? And that was no, we don't. So I think those are things that we're going to have to keep reminding one another about, these kinds of things. I guess I'm honored to be part of this, but I think those are really, really missed opportunities. And when I made my little report to the Statewide Independent Living Council, there was a representative from the state education, and I don't remember her name, but she expressed also that we need to have this kind of representation in the group. The other thing that the Silk expressed is those meetings that we're going to have, the 8 workshops, we need to get those on the calendar as soon as possible. And I know Lisa said that'll be on the website, but that needs to happen as soon as possible, because as you know, today there's there's at least two conflicts with what we're happening. So we need to get those on the calendar so people can get them on their calendar too. One more thing about Lisa. Yes, she is tenacious. I could not get something to work for me as a blind person last night, and I don't remember what time she sent it to me, but she keeps trying. So I do appreciate that, Lisa. Thank you so much.
I'm learning as I go. And so if I make a misstep, I encourage and would welcome anybody to reach out and let me know if I could do better. So I will continue to do that. Okay, Dana. Dana is our closed captioner. Would you like to say hello, Dana? Well, Dana is our closed captioner.
Hello,
So
sorry.
that's okay, Dana. That's okay. I just wanted to welcome you and acknowledge that you're here and you're helping us today.
Thank you.
Okay, and let me see. I've got Jennifer Richards. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I think I figured that out by now. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Richards. I serve as the Chief Rights Attorney with Aging Disability Services Division. I just really appreciated the great questions that were asked during the session, and I just really enjoy listening and learning from everyone. And so I'm just here to be an ally. My role is to educate, advance policy, and provide technical assistance to support older adults and persons with disabilities. So I just like to be a fly on the wall and see how I can further that mission and be a resource to this group.
Thank you, Jennifer. You've been invaluable so far, so I do appreciate you.
Thank you.
And then we have the member of my team who I harangued into helping me today, and that's Miss Margaret Delgudis.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to be here passively taking notes.
Okay, and there's one question I have for the group, and it's a process question, and that was I recognized during our study session, and I think, Jennifer, it was you who did it, that when you introduced yourself, you actually described what you looked like. Is that a best practice? Oh, I see some people like nodding their head yes. So I will then say, my name is Lisa Watson, and tell me if I get this right, guys. So I'm a middle-aged white woman, and you guys can't tell this, but I'm almost 6 feet tall. So when you see me, don't be surprised. I'm a very tall, middle-aged white woman. Is that the right way to describe myself? Eli? Oh, you are on mute.
Two things, the closed captioning is not working.
Closed captioning isn't working?
Nope.
Okay.
And there we go.
Are we back on?
And number two, why do we need to introduce the way we look?
I don't know the answer to that, but I assumed it was a best practice because a couple of people did it during the study sessions. My guess is that it's probably because we have the benefit of seeing people to see what people look like, and that gives us context for where they come from. Would that be the reason why? And folks who are blind don't have that privilege. So I think that's my guess.
Yeah.
If anybody has anything else to add?
Yeah, this is Cindy Swanson. As a person who is blind and short and past middle age, it is helpful. It's an access issue, and a lot of organizations are doing that. A lot of organizations will say, I'm, a white-skinned, light-skinned person. I have blonde hair. I'm wearing a blue dress, just to give context to what's going on. So I think it is a respectful and a gracious way of saying it. But if somebody doesn't want to describe themselves, I guess it's their right. But it's a ramp. It's a ramp for blind people.
Well, thank you, Cindy. I do appreciate that. And thank you, Jennifer, for modeling it, because that's how I thought I might need to do that as well. Okay, well, with that, team, this is what we're trying to accomplish over the next couple of hours together. So the first thing that I want to do is I want us to validate the use of the strategic framework that is actually used throughout the Department of Health and Human Services within the state of Nevada. So we're going to take a look at that, and I'm going to ask you guys is there anything that we want to add particular to this group and its charge? So that's the first thing. And it's so important because it actually is the lens with which we should make all decisions moving forward. And so as we look at that vision, we look at the mission, and we look at those guiding principles, we need to sort of ground ourselves in those and understand that every decision we make is done through that lens. And so if there's anything that you may want to add that's particular to this group or its charge, I want to give you guys the opportunity to do that. Second thing that we're going to do is I want us to take a look at the data that we've collected to date regarding the target population as well as the description of the state system. I would say we're about 40% in terms of the data that we intend to collect and the value of that data. So we'll take a look at the data that we've already collected, and then you guys are going to make some key decisions about the additional data that needs to be collected, specifically around key person interviews and our community-based workshops. So I'm going to gather from you guys both, is this enough? Is this too much? Is this too little? I like to say that when we go into kind of understanding the needs and doing that situational analysis, that I like to take the Goldilocks approach, which is not too little, not too much, but just the right amount of information for us to drive our decisions about what this plan really needs to look like. We're going to be identifying, are these the right people to interview? Are these the right organizations to reach out and conduct an interview with? If you guys have particular people within those organizations who you feel like are really the ones that we ought to target, I'd love to hear from you guys about that. When we look at those community-based workshops, I want to test with you guys the sort of preliminary list that we've developed in terms of where we will conduct those, and then also test the areas of exploration with you. So again, speaking to Cindy's highlight in her introduction, we are not at SEI experts in regards to the target population or aging and disability services. We are experts in the process. You as the steering committee are the experts, right? And so your charge is to steer us in the right direction. And so I will be consistently asking you guys to do that on our behalf. All right. Okay, well then with that, let's start with our foundation, the vision, mission, and guiding principles. So to give you guys a little bit of background, this vision, mission, and most of the guiding principles were actually established when the 2016 plan, Olmstead plan, through ADSD was developed. So this framework actually sort of has its roots in Olmstead, for lack of a better description. The Department of Health and Human Services ultimately took that and then started to utilize it as the framework for services agency-wide. And then when the behavioral health folks put together their community integration plan back in 2018, not the one that they just updated, but the 2018 version, they added an equity guiding principle. So we're going to take a look at that. I want to make sure everyone kind of understands that that's the framework we're working within, but then I also want to give you guys an opportunity to make any adjustments there. So with that, this is the vision statement. And so what a vision statement really is meant to do is to describe the future that we're all trying to create, right? So it's aspirational, but it should also be achievable. So the vision that DHHS has established is that Nevadans, regardless of age or ability, will enjoy a meaningful life led with dignity and self-determination. Now, the mission statement is a statement of how you actually achieve the vision. So what is it that you're going to do in order to achieve that vision? The mission statement is that the mission of DHHS is to ensure that older adults and persons with disabilities have the opportunity to achieve optimal quality of life in the community of their choice. Eli, do you have something that you want to ask? And you're on mute.
Yes, thank you. This is Eli for the record. When you say to ensure that older adult and person with disability, what do you mean by older? Do you want to be more descriptive?
I will actually defer to somebody from ADSD. I know that in looking at the myriad of programs offered specifically under ADSD, I think the qualifying age for many of those programs is 60, but I'd ask somebody from ADSD to weigh in on that. I see you kind of shaking your head, Cheyenne. Is that roughly
Sorry.
about the age range?
Yes, I am having a hard time getting my controls to pop up on my screen. So.
I understand the struggle is real.
But yeah,
So-
typically when we refer to an older adult, it's someone age 60 and older, with the qualifier, of course, that for an Olmstead plan specifically, that it's not the broad populations of everyone we serve, but that more narrowed definition of those that have those ADL, IADL needs, and potentially risk of institutionalization. So.
Thank you, Cheyenne. I see, Julie, you have your hand up.
Yeah, just in the vision statement. Why isn't the phrase in the most inclusive environment possible there?
Can you repeat your question for me one more
Yeah.
time, Julie? I'm sorry.
In the vision statement, it says the planets, regardless of age or ability, will enjoy a meaningful life with led with dignity and determination. And I suggest we add to the end in the most inclusive environment possible.
In the most, so if I want to repeat, so I make sure I understand, is that your suggestion would be to add contextually, like in the most integrated setting possible?
Or I think inclusive is a better word.
So here's the thing, and
I'm just wondering.
so like the inclusion or the integrated setting component of it, I hear you, and we can't change DHHS's vision or mission. What we can do is that we can add to it in terms of like contextualizing it. And so I think that there's something I can do in terms of putting in the document, like for the purposes of this plan, this group also seeks to ensure like the most integrated setting possible, or something to that effect.
That I think that would clarify the whole point of the Olmstead plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. So what I'll do is that I can, and I'm going to get to you. I see you raising your hand, Eli. Is that if you take a look at the strategic plan document and its current iteration, I could add something at the bottom that says all of these things will be done within the framework of community integration or within the most integrated setting possible. So I'll try my best, and then we'll bring it back to the group at our next steering committee meeting for you guys to weigh in on whether or not I got it right. Eli, you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I mean, Julie brought up a good point. You said regardless of age, then the mission statement is saying over 60. So it, to me, it's conflicting.
So I think one of the things that is important to understand, and then I'm going to defer to ADSD on this, or anybody from the state who may be participating, but the DHHS also provides, children and family services. So I think that they were
Right.
trying to be inclusive in their language and not leave anybody out. And so that's the regardless of age or ability component. And I do want to say, and Cheyenne, I'm going to ask you to correct me if I'm wrong, but that 60-year-old kind of threshold, I think in many of the programs is an eligibility component that is not driven by state decision makers.
Yeah, this is Cheyenne. I believe that the vision and the mission, they're essentially saying the same things, just in a little bit different context. So in the vision, it's regardless of age or ability. The mission is looking at it a bit more specifically in terms of older adults and people with disabilities, which is generally just a different way of saying regardless of age or ability. A more traditional way of saying it, I suppose.
Yeah.
But good points all around. So.
Okay, I'm going to move on to the guiding principles. So there are a total of, I believe, 7 guiding principles. So yeah, 7 guiding principles. And guiding principles are the way that we behave within the system, right? It's like how we do our work. The way that I often describe vision, mission, and guiding principles for folks who are kind of new to the strategic planning framework is that the vision is similar to, like, if I was going to Europe, because Eli has, shown us that he just came back from, if I was going to Egypt, that would be my vision. Like, my vision is that I will spend a glorious 5 days in Egypt in the month of March. And the mission is how I get to Egypt, right? Am I going to travel first class or coach? So it's kind of the way that we actually get to Egypt. The guiding principles is how am I going to behave on my journey, right? Like, am I going to use a tour guide? Or am I going to, go to a 5-star hotel or an Airbnb? Am I going to eat out at new restaurants, right? So it's all the ways in which we kind of show up to do the work. So that's what our guiding principles really mean, is what we actually value and how we show up to do this work. So the first one is around independence. People should have options and the ability to select the manner in which they live. We just fundamentally believe that that is true. And all of the decisions we make should be made using that guiding principle. Access. People's needs are identified and met quickly. Dignity. People are viewed and respected as human beings. Integration. People can live, work, and play as a part of their community. 3 more. Quality. Services and supports achieve desired person-centered outcomes. Sustainability, services and supports can be delivered over the long term so individuals can be self-sufficient. And then the new guiding principle is equity. Systems and services will center the priorities of people with diverse backgrounds and identities and include marginalized and underrepresented groups in planning strategies and resource allocation toward equitable outcomes. Okay, so we have 7 guiding principles. Couldn't fit them all on one slide. And so the question that I have for the steering committee is, are there any additional considerations that should be utilized to help guide the ADSD Olmstead planning process? And the one that we've already heard is around community integration. Is there anything else that you feel like we need to have mutual agreement about that would offer us sort of a framework for how to make all of our decisions moving forward that isn't covered by the vision, mission, or the 7 guiding principles?
Lisa, this is Cindy Swanson.
Yes, Cindy.
I wonder if in any way it would be appropriate, where it would say in the guiding principles that we will be able to collaborate with other divisions, departments in the state, such as education and VR, and braid those organizations somehow as a guiding principle. And I want to say one thing. This is just kind of a personal situation with one of the guiding principles we talked about, and I don't think it said this, but something about independence. And I think what, in my opinion, what's really important for all of us, whether we have a disability, is to learn how to live healthy, interdependent lives. Because whether I'm blind or have Down syndrome, or I've got it all the things going for me, we still live interdependently. So, but more importantly, I'm just wondering how we can capture that, braiding our work together with all state organizations, such as VR and education. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. I'll open the floor for folks to weigh in on Cindy's recommendation around adding a contextual component about working in collaboration with other state departments. Before I open up the floor for that, though, I do want to just reiterate what we shared at the study session, which is that while we're not there now, in terms of creating a state plan, and I think this speaks to what Diane raised at our first steering committee meeting, I think that there is this interest and understanding that that's where we need to move towards. And I know that ADSD has said they unequivocally would like to add that as a specific objective of this particular Olmstead plan, that we would position ourselves to do that in the future. And so that will be, it's kind of a given in terms of one of the only objective that we know right now, or strategy that will be part of this Olmstead plan, provided that you guys actually approve it as a steering committee. But having said that, is there anybody who would like to weigh in on Cindy's recommendation about contextualizing this part around collaboration with other state agencies? Corey? I see Corey's hand up, and then after Corey will be Kimberly.
Am I unmuted? I don't know how to work this Zoom.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, but you can't see me though, right?
I can see you as well. You've got a great.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. All right. I'm good. All right. I think that collaboration between the agency is significant, and families shouldn't feel like or people with disabilities, older adults, shouldn't feel like they're starting over with each agency that they go to. There's many different agencies, and when there's a handoff between agencies, it needs to be coordinated and smooth. That's for sure. I'd like to see it. I have one other thing that's jumping out at me under the integration. It says people can live, work, and play as part of their community. And speaking of collaboration, that transportation, here in Elko, transportation is only around 3 o'clock. So if you're somebody with a disability and you want to go to a movie at 5 o'clock, you rely on transportation, that becomes a barrier.
Mm-hmm.
So working with transportation, working with some providing transportation so people can do, so making transportation built into something else. I don't know, like community-based transportation, or if it's transportation provided by a different agency. And the other thing that jumps out to me is equity. And I'm not really certain what groups are considered marginalized or underrepresented. I know that I have an adult brother who's 50, and in order for him to arrange transportation to get back and forth to work, he has to call into Medicaid. My brother has two problems. One, he has a significant speech delay, so the automated Medicaid can't understand him, and he also transposes numbers. And so when he's entering his Medicaid number, even if he's looking at it, he can't enter it correctly, but that's the system, and there's no alternative. So that service that's available to him does not serve him. So I was wondering if if that's one thing that equity would be looking at, that system works great for people that have speech and don't transpose numbers, but not for people that have those traits.
So I think a couple of things. So the transportation is something that is and likely will continue to be a barrier across many, many systems. And having done a lot of different planning for the state, you know, I go to Las Vegas and they talk about how sometimes it takes 3 hours to get across town. And so I think that, you know, the rural versus the urban, they both have transportation issues. They're just different issues. And I have no doubt that that will come up as a barrier to access, as we saw it in the UNLV study. We've seen it in every kind of state plan that I've ever developed. And so I think that we will be exploring that as a component of this plan as well. I don't know that it belongs in the guiding values or the guiding principles component of the plan, but I definitely think that we will be exploring it as a component of the needs assessment. And then there was one other point that you made that I wanted to touch upon. But it's because you raised equity, but I think I've lost it right now, Corey. So I apologize.
I was just telling the story about how the Medicaid system for transportation to get my brother back and forth and work is dependent upon him having appropriate speech and being able to sequence numbers. And so whatever, I guess the systems need to be responsive to people that are trying to use the system, I guess, and he can't use it, so he doesn't get that benefit.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So I think when we take a look at the key person interviews, what we're really looking for in those interviews is understanding kind of where the system works and where it doesn't. So I would just ask you to be very thoughtful when we go through the areas of exploration about whether or not we will capture that kind of information in the questions that I've drafted. If not, then let's add a question or change one of the questions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Kimberly.
Ma'am, so I think it's a combination of a few things. So as we're listening to a lot of self-advocates and or family members, I think the issue is addressed kind of with Julie's, the inclusiveness. So what does inclusiveness differ from integration and then inclusion? So I think Corey just proved it right now with her statement as well, is that the intent is there. And I know this is something that Cindy's brought up before as well too. So we're in compliance, but is it functional? So as we have these guiding principles, are they functional in the community? So one individual could be attaining services not only through aging, but DHHS at the same time. So for the departments to understand their flow and process is one thing versus the consumer. So as you just mentioned, as we get further down into the nuts and bolts about finding the right key people, hopefully that will help guide us. I think in the future that maybe we didn't knock out the first round because that is exactly the issue that we're having. We're not able to cross collaborate, which would actually benefit both agencies, especially because the consumer's being heard as a whole person. So I think everybody's highlighting the areas that we're trying to seek. And I know that we're following a very strict guideline only for the purposes of making sure that it turns out complete. But I think if we can continue to maybe in the parking lot write some of these concerns down so that we don't forget, or if we're not able to attend one of the meetings or a future study session or things like that, that we're still mentioning some of those areas, because those are across the board, especially for the council. And then as me as a parent, again, living in the rural, but I have two medically complex individuals that have rare genetic syndromes. One's a 1 out of 100 in the world. One's 1 out of 500. So even if there was something in the system being processed, the way that they do their medical is completely different than someone else. And so I know we can't tailor services to meet everyone, but if we had an inclusive environment, which hit every one of these guiding principles, that actually creates the community in which we would be thinking on this regularly, and we wouldn't have to have it broken up into different versions repeatedly and have the meetings about the meetings we just had. So I'm sure Cindy and the other self-advocates can probably clarify that a little deeper. But as I'm listening and hearing it, it's something that we hear often in meetings. And then unfortunately, because we're accessing transportation and education at the same time, it is very difficult, I think, in some aspects that when we have an opportunity to talk about it, but it doesn't fit this category right now. Sometimes it's frustrating to get that output from the community because are we going to be heard if we're consistently repeating the same need? But that cross collaboration, I think, is extremely huge. The inclusiveness that Julie mentioned is, I think, different than inclusion. I can't force you to include me, but if the environment was inclusive, that changes the dynamics and how people can move forward and have that dignity of life and choose, because those options will be readily available if we, as you just stated, when we describe ourselves, it's different from what we're accustomed to doing. But if we think about someone else's needs, I myself would never have known you were 6 feet tall, but now to know that you are, when I see you, I'm going to know that it's you. So the fact that we just change our approach a little bit in communication or descriptive conversation allows for the expansion of things. So I really am appreciative that everybody that's on here is willing to chime in, even if it doesn't fit in today's category. But at least it's on record. We can come back and visit it. It's recorded. So I appreciate those aspects that we're not losing, that oftentimes these kind of meetings are not recorded.
I do appreciate that, Kimberly. And, you know, I have yet to actually develop the status report, which I promised you guys will come after every single one of our steering committee meetings. So you guys can take it back to your constituencies, your commission, your community, to kind of keep them abreast of what's going on. So I'm going to now take the frame that you just offered in terms of let's make sure to parking lot this, but come back to it. So that it doesn't get lost. I will definitely keep that in mind when I even structure that status report and give that to you guys for review. Thank you. Okay, we've got a couple of other folks with their hands up. Julie, I think that I saw you were up next, and then we will go to you, Chuck.
Just real quick, I agree with Cindy in terms of working with other agencies. That's so important because as a disabled person, in order to live in an inclusive community, I have to access many different resources from many different agencies, and if they all work together, my life would be a lot easier. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Chuck?
I'm actually going to defer to Corey. I think she had her hand up first. Corey, no?
Oh,
Okay.
no. Do I need to
think
put it
you
down?
wanna- Yeah, put it down.
Yeah, I have two comments. One is, you know, on a couple of occasions already, we've heard about the exceptions related to access to services. And I think that really needs to be addressed and is actually addressed in the first guiding principle around quality, that services need to be person-centered. And so I think the exception should be the rule, as opposed to, you know, trying to find workarounds for individuals who have challenges accessing services. So again, I think that term person-centered really is describing the issue that keeps coming up, that people have challenges accessing services, even though they might be available to the vast majority of the population. So I think finding ways to provide person-centered care is really a core aspect of these guiding principles. So for example, you know, if, and I can't remember her name, I apologize, but individual has a brother who has trouble accessing Medicaid transportation services. Medicaid ought to be assigning a case manager to that individual beneficiary to assist with those types of issues. That's an example of creating person-centered services. And so I think, we really need to keep a focus on that. Second, I would suggest as a guiding principle, even though this is an ADSD plan, this slide says DHHS guiding principles. And I think one of the guiding principles is that the funding needs to be directed toward these types of principles. So for example, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services have come out with a very detailed set of principles called the settings rule, where services need to be targeted so that individuals can engage in community life. And so I think funding needs to be in here as a guiding principle. Now I know you said, Lisa, that we can't change the guiding principles, but somehow either in creating context with additional narrative, somehow funding needs to be a big part of it, because without that, this is just talk. And so I think we really need to be addressing funding as a means to achieve these guiding principles. So thank you.
So I would just ask for, if you have any ideas, Chuck, about how to use that as a contextual frame for the strategic framework, I would be open to that. I think that it does highlight one of the tensions that we are experiencing, and that is Medicaid is under a different, division. DHCFP is not ADSD, and the funding mechanism, they're a part of the funding mechanism. The legislature is another part of that funding mechanism. And so I think that we have to understand that, yes, funding drives everything. It's the bottom line of everything. And it's what drives things forward, but it's also what stops progress as well, because somebody's always going to lose in that equation. And so if you have an idea about how to make funding a guiding principle in a way that is actually actionable through ADSD, I'm happy to contextualize this framework doing that. But what I don't want to do is kind of repeat the mistake that we made back in 2016. And that is to say, we have to do this, and yet we are dependent upon another mechanism in which we have no authority over to do so. Because I don't want to see us back in 2000, or looking forward to in 2025 saying, well, we did that thing again, right? Where we developed a plan that was outside of the scope of ADSD.
Again, this says DHHS guiding principles, not ADSD guiding principles. So if indeed it is just ADSD, then we need to say that. But I do think that if this is truly what DHHS is trying to accomplish, then funding needs to be there. And Medicaid is not a distinct part of, or separate part of, not only DHHS, but of the relationships between ADSD, Division of Welfare and Supportive Services. And so I think you can put those statements in here. What it does create is tension, which is okay. Tension's all right, because if it puts pressure on the funding entity to comply with Olmstead, then God bless them. I think there's nothing better than a good class action lawsuit to direct attention on core principles that need to be accomplished, and funding particularly. So I think my personal opinion is it's fine to put something like that funding for services and supports have that programs allow for full access to benefits of community living, and that people are able to receive services in the most integrated setting. But somehow tying funding to this, I think, is extremely important. Otherwise, we don't accomplish a lot, quite frankly.
And let me raise this issue because I don't want to leave anything under the table. I always like to put things on top of the table, but there is in the Olmstead a funding component. And I don't know if Jennifer, if you're still on, yeah, Jennifer, you are, and I don't know if you can hear me right now, but there is a component that it says like if funding is available. And so I think that we just have to recognize that's actually in the Olmstead decision. And so that I think that there is this tension that Olmstead does like acknowledge that we are working with funding limitations. And I think that that's something every state needs to take up. Because if we were printing money, it would be no issue, but we can't print money. So there's gonna have to be hard choices made, and you guys are going to have to essentially make them when we get to the admin component of the plan. Jennifer, is there anything that you want to add to that, or can you reference the exact language that I'm thinking of right now?
Sorry, I'm just pulling up the.
Trying to find it for me.
Yeah, I think you're referencing the reasonable modification regulation, which how do I condense this? The Olmstead decision recognized that the state would never have a defense to a lawsuit if they had to provide every service and every accommodation. So really what's only required is a reasonable modification. And they have to look at the totality of the service being offered for the entire population. And the state would have a defense if the funding fundamentally alters the existing service array. So yes, funding comes to play. We do have lawsuits where the state's removed funding. There's still been a successful Olmstead lawsuit, but we have other decisions where funding fundamentally alters the service array. So that's not a successful Olmstead case. I don't know if I'm explaining this very well. But
I didn't mean to put you on the spot for a legal opinion, Jennifer.
No, that's
so that I think that there's just this acknowledgement, even in the Olmstead decision, that this is a tall charge. And so I just want to make sure that folks understand that that is a limitation that we're going to consistently bump up against. And I think we have to figure out like, where can we make the most good? Like, if I had to identify what I think we really need to do different in this plan outside of what the 2016 plan had, it's really going to be about like, where can we make the most amount of impact for folks? And I'm going to defer to you guys for that because I don't know what that is. I can gather information and I can provide you guys with themes of what we hear, what we see, but ultimately the steering committee will be the ones that make those choices.
And this also, sorry, just one more comment. This seems a good time to add to the conversation that I think it's really great to have these discussions about broad applicability and other divisions and other services and programs, but an Olmstead plan is not a requirement. It's a voluntary process to engage with, and our division has undertaken to engage in that process and develop the plan. But we can't require anyone else to make that participation and decision to participate. You know, the decision just highlights that having an Olmstead plan is a way to achieve compliance with the ADA and to help a state demonstrate that it's making efforts to maintain in compliance So I just want to put that out there that ADSD has voluntarily undertaken this task because we as an agency want to engage with the population that we serve and improve and have this plan. And we hope that we can bring all of these other divisions and agencies along with us. And we want collaboration. And I 100% agree with the comments that everyone has made that a true Olmstead plan would be fully collaborative. But again, the decision, it's voluntary. It's not a requirement to be in compliance. So I just wanted to put that out there because that's come up at every meeting. And I don't know if that's been clear in my communication about the actual Olmstead decision. This plan is voluntary. It's not required.
So may I, so I'll withdraw my comment because then, but I do think that we ought to headline this as ADSD guiding principles, not DHHS.
Well, these are DHHS guiding principles. Are you?
But if this plan is just specific to ADSD, then yeah, we need to make sure that folks understand it, that this is not a broader plan. And that I know we've had this discussion already, but that somehow when we construct the plan, that it's very clear that it's ADSD and not DHHS.
So I think that what I can do is that, let me stop and pause. Part of the challenge is that while we're trying to move towards like a unified kind of approach throughout the state, one way to do this is to use this DHHS strategic framework. It kind of sets the stage for where we intend to move. And as I shared with you, we will have an objective about we need to move towards a unified state plan. I think that if we opt out of utilizing this and creating a ADSD specific framework, then we are moving further away as opposed to closer to a state plan. So what I would like to suggest, and I think then we have to, I'll take your comment, Eli and Diane, and then I think we have to move on because you guys got to give me a shot at contextualizing this in our next iteration, right? Is that I can in there say, while we're using the DHHS framework as a starting place, we also at ADSD recognize that these other guiding principles or these other elements or implementing or utilization of this framework is done within this setting or context is important because we recognize that this is an ADSD specific plan. So I can take a shot at that. And then I'll bring it back at our next steering committee for you guys to tell me if I got it right or if I got it wrong. All right, Diane and Eli, and then we're going to move on.
I think you just captured, Lisa, what I was going to recommend, that we call it out, we describe it in an opening, setting the stage narrative of some kind before we jump into, you know, the nuts and bolts of the plan. But I also think that we should not shy away from the tension, and that we should acknowledge that we are not wanting to make the same mistakes that were made 5 years ago. You know, in order to avoid those mistakes, these things will have to happen. We understand that we don't have the power to do that, but it would be our recommendation to do them. Those sorts of comments in a setting the stage for the entire document.
Okay, I'll beef it up a little bit then. So what you see in the next iteration will be a little bit more contextualized than what you got right now. Eli.
Yeah, this is Eli. I think Chuck brought up a very good point as well, Lisa. I think we should add part of our guiding principle, access to services. That would address some of the issues that we discussed earlier, access to service for the deaf, for someone who's blind, for someone who's disabled, everything. I don't think if you have this principle, and what good is it if you don't have additional resources for the person who needs additional accommodation? So I think it needs to be together.
So we have an access guiding principle. Is your suggestion to provide additional information around that, or
Yeah,
I'm unclear?
Make sure it's reasonable. Use the word like reasonable accommodation to the specific need or something, but I think that needs to be broader because people need doesn't necessarily mean you need accommodation like interpreters or a walker or a seeing dog to order to live independently. So there are different needs for different communities. And I
Right.
think we need to make that a little bit more descriptive.
So again, I would just, if you guys have a specific recommendation, in order for me to get it right, I think I just would ask you guys to shoot me any kind of like information in writing that I could use and work and try to create like a singular voice around it. Because again, there's this tension of like, if we become more specific, then we inevitably leave people out. And this particular value around access says people's needs, which is as inclusive as you can get from a language standpoint. So I think that again, like we're recognizing one of the tensions is, to what extent are we going to leave the language open because there's little accountability, but a whole lot of inclusivity when you do that, right? Or are we going to become more specific, which is very clear, but then you run the risk of excluding some folks. So it's just a tension that we're going to have to manage throughout this process.
No problem. I'll get together with Cheyenne and see if we can bounce some ideas around. Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. So we've got an hour left and a lot to get through. So we are going to try our best, because I hear you guys when you say we really need to get these community workshops on the books. And in order for me to do that, I need some information from you guys. All right, so that's our next agenda item, not the one that we're working on right now. What we're working on right now is actually taking a look at the Olmstead plan template, where I've added some content in there. As I shared with you guys during our kickoff meeting, we build out these plans in an iterative fashion, which means you guys will see it every single steering committee and sometimes even in between as I make the adjustments and as decisions are made. So I'm just going to lay out what has been added. So in the background subsection, this section was actually drafted and presented to you guys as a template. There's no changes to that background subsection underneath that setting the stage category of the plan. The purpose of the plan subsection actually was updated. However, I will say to you that in an effort to make the document accessible, I used an older version that had already run through the accessibility check and only realized that I sent you guys the wrong version when Cindy told me that there were some accessibility issues with that document I sent out yesterday. So I think that it's valuable. I just want to point out that that last paragraph under the purpose of the plan actually has been updated. I'm going to pull the document up right now, and it's just the very last sentence there so that you guys can see that change. Can you guys see my screen with the document up on it? Okay, perfect. So again, this is going back to kind of the ongoing conversation we have about, is this, you know, a universal plan or is this ADSD specific? And you can see here that in the original document, we acknowledge the fact that in order for us to kind of realize the vision that we have, that we just reviewed in terms of DHHS, it was going to require like the joint efforts of multiple departments, community-based organizations, as well as communities themselves. We've changed it though, because we want to be very, very clear and specific that this plan is specifically targeted around actions that ADSD can take. So you can see here, ADSD understands that to achieve sustainable change for all of Nevada's residents who are disabled and seeking opportunity within communities of their choice will require partnerships and efforts that are beyond the scope of the state service system. We know that to be true. Because of that, this plan will explore the variety of supports needed by Nevadans with a disability, but will focus its action on what ADSD has the authority to implement. So here is just kind of like that balancing act of, we acknowledge this, we will explore some things that are beyond the scope of ADSD, and yet when we get to the action plan itself, it will be specific and will offer all of you the opportunity to hold ADSD accountable to their particular plan. So I just wanted to point that out for you guys. That's actually what the version you should have received says. So you will see that moving forward. Under the methods and approach section, I actually have just drafted this, knowing what we will be doing. I've already shared with you guys kind of the scope and the approach. You guys approved that. I will populate it with more of the specifics once we actually collect the data that we've described in terms of key person interviews and then those community-based workshops. So any questions with the setting the stage section of that Olmstead plan? Seeing no hands up, I'm going to move on to the next section. Okay. All right. So we just talked about this. So I inserted all of these sections based on the HHS framework, but as we just discussed, I will be beefing this up and contextualizing it with some of the issues that you guys raised. I will present it to you guys at our next steering committee for your review and modification and subsequent approval. So you will see that updated in the next iteration. In looking at the understanding our current reality section, this really is where we lay out like what does this current communities look like who could potentially be served under this plan, as well as the sort of service system that supports community integration opportunities. And so what we've done here, and in the opening section, I really tried to demonstrate with a graphic how the particular population who will be served under this Olmstead plan is nestled under sort of the larger populations. I'm going to put that on the screen just to show you guys that we're all looking at the same thing. So here you can see on the screen that you have the whole population of Nevada residents. Within that whole population, you guys have, and this is actually in a subsequent section, about 13% of your overall population are identified through the US Census Bureau of having some sort of disability. That's the larger population of folks who have disabilities within the overarching population of Nevada. Hold on just a second, Eli, and I'll get to you. And then within that population of Nevadans who have a disability, there's a smaller subsection of folks who are actually served by ADSD. And then of that population, there's a smaller subsection, which are individuals who are impacted by the Olmstead decision. And then we actually used some of the information directly from the DOJ to describe or to define what that actually looks like. So individuals impacted by the Olmstead decision include individuals with disabilities who are unnecessarily institutionalized or who are at risk of unnecessary institutionalization, who could live in a more integrated setting with appropriate services and supports. So I offer that as a sort of framework as we move through understanding kind of what the total population is, and then the service system that actually supports community integration. So before I move on, I want to pause. And Eli, did you have a question about this?
Yes, I do. This is Eli. Looking at the graph, it's saying the only people that is impacted by the Olmstead decision is part of ADSD. What about those people who are not getting services that needs to get services? So they're kind of excluding that little or big population. So it's kind of like misrepresenting what the actual picture is.
So you're saying like folks who could be provided services and live in an integrated setting, but aren't necessarily being served by ADSD right now.
Correct.
I see what you're saying. And this is a plan for ADSD. So I'm just trying to be thoughtful about, about how best to make that clarification. Because I think it's a good clarification. Like we recognize that there are people who could be served by ADSD that aren't being served. And that within that population.
Bingo.
Yeah, I hear you. Jennifer, it looks like you were about to say something.
Just a point of clarification. on your question, I think it's a good question. Are you also talking about people that want services but have barriers to access the service?
Mhm.
Because if you read the decision, there has to be, it's a voluntary service. So the two women, for example, they wanted to go live in the community. They wanted that service, but the state of Georgia said, no, we don't have that available for you. So I think it's a good point in that people are facing barriers to access the service, but if we're talking about people that seek private services outside of, that's also choice, they wouldn't fall under the scope. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, but I think that there may also be like folks who may not be eligible for certain services or may just have barriers to accessing. Like I'll use Corey's brother as an example. Like he wants to access the service, right? But he can't necessarily do that. And so he may be outside the scope of the ADSD service population, not because he's not eligible or he doesn't need it, but because he just is having a challenge.
Or he doesn't know about it.
Right. And I think that we will explore those issues, right? We're going to explore them when we really identify what are the top needs of folks. So I just have to think about, I hear your point, Eli, and I think you're right. I just have to think about how to either revise this graphic or provide some additional context in it to acknowledge the point that you make, which there are people within that sort of larger circle of Nevadans with a disability who may want to access ADSD services, but are unable to do so for a variety of reasons. So let me work on that. Good point made. Chuck?
Yeah, thank you. I think, again, getting back to the comment that Eli made, I think it's very important because what he just described are the wait lists that are associated with most of the services provided by ADSD as well as the department. And so people may want the service, they may be eligible for the service, but they can't get the service. Or the service are so poor or so widely unavailable that they're waiting for it. So I think there's part of this Venn diagram that needs to describe that population that are sitting there on a wait list, waiting for, number one, services to be available, number two, for state staffing to become available, and three, for the funding, again, I raised the funding issue, for the funding to be available. And so there's a gap there in terms of service needs that Eli well described.
No, I understand, and I'll work on acknowledging that in this graphic in the next iteration. So this is a perfect demonstration of you guys steering me in the right direction. I appreciate it. Okay. Oh, Jennifer, I'm sorry, I didn't see you, but now I do.
No, that's okay. I was just trying to lower my hand. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
What you're describing in this discussion is reflected in the case law. Chuck's comments specifically about wait lists. There are certainly many Olmstead cases from other states regarding wait lists. So.
And I didn't mention this at the opening, but I should have, because a lot of the things that you guys are raising are actually in the 2016 Olmstead plan. And I think, Diane, the UNR survey spoke to this really well about, those things that were raised as critical issues in the 2016 plan are still critical issues in the state. And so during our next steering committee, we're actually going to be providing you guys with an update about what movement has been made essentially, and where we want to test with you guys essentially like what the UNR recommendation was about, should we carry these over, and then create some specificity around ADSD action around it. So we will be looking at that at our next steering committee and then testing those for sort of repurposing them under this new plan. Okay, so I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint. Can you guys see the PowerPoint again? All right, awesome. Okay, so I think I've gotten feedback about the opening section. And so then we're charged with, okay, how do we actually describe the population? And it's why we created that Venn diagram, is to really kind of help the reader kind of get rooted about there's this larger population of folks who have a disability in the state. We thought it was important to understand just kind of that landscape for contextual purposes. And so you can see in the document, we have data that offers estimates about how many people in Nevada have a disability, what kind of disability, and then we drill down a little bit to separate it out between children and adults. In some of the data sets, I think it's important for you guys to know that the data specifies like children who are over the age of 5. So there's I think one particular component, and I'll call it out next time. I should have done it this time, so I apologize for that. But the devil's kind of in the details when it comes to this data. It is US Census data, so it's like the most widely utilized data set in terms of like population estimates. It is projections, so it's American Community Survey information, 1-year estimates. So I think that I tried to demonstrate that by referencing it on every single page, but there are qualifiers, but this is the best kind of guess or best information that we have available to us. I also, Dina, from the administrator of DHHS, is giving me access to minority health and their records. And so I'm trying to gather some additional information that will be populated into this section in the next iteration as well. So I'll pull up the doc really quickly just to show you guys what this looks like. I did break it down by county because I thought that that was helpful. So it gives you the overall county population, how many people live in that county, the number of people with a disability in that county, and then what the number actually represents from a percentage point. And you can see this is where I gathered the 13% of the overall population has a disability. And then these categories, again, were developed by the US Census Bureau. So these are not self-selected from me. These are all of the disability categories that the ACS data actually uses. So we have adults with disabilities, the percentage that have a particular kind of disability. The thing that's important to note here are that these are not mutually exclusive, right? So somebody could be represented in multiple categories. And that's why if you were to take the numbers and add them up, they don't actually add up to the total number of adults with a disability, because some folks are represented in multiple categories. You could have a hearing difficulty and a cognitive difficulty, and you would be in each of those categories. So it's just something for you all to note as we're using this data as a grounding kind of mechanism in our analysis. And then the same kind of data, they have less categories for children, the same kind of data for children in terms of the number of children with specific disabilities by county. Okay. So with that, are there any questions or concerns? So you guys have already weighed in on the opening graphic, so I understand that. Any questions or concerns with the graphics around the number of people with a disability in the state of Nevada? This is an area, Cindy, that the accessibility issue, I think, is challenging because of the way, like, I actually listen to the document being read and it doesn't read very well. Yes. And I don't know how else to demonstrate this information without losing a lot of the richness of the like drill down of it. So I am open to any recommendations that anyone has about how I could make this more accessible. One of the things I had considered, Cindy, is to actually use alternative text and then to put the alternative text that has it saying in Carson City, this is the number of people with this type of disability. This is the number of people with that type of disability. So if you're willing to work with me, I can try a couple of things there. And then you can basically give me the thumbs up or the thumbs down.
Thank you. Yes, we will work together on this. Thank you. Text is always better than graphics.
I know. Okay. So then the next section is really then about taking and describing what is the current service system that supports people in living in their community and making that sort of in giving them that option or that choice. And so I've tried to describe it in the way that sort of ADSD is structured. And so the first sort of category here is that we identify by sort of specific populations that are being served by ADSD, individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities, individuals who have a physical disability, and then older adults. And then the different kinds of programs and services that each sort of population is provided. So you can see under the individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities, there's developmental services, and then there's the HCBS waiver for persons with intellectual disabilities. In terms of the individuals who have a physical disability, they're served through the waiver for physically disabled. Under older adults, they have a variety of different services, senior support services, senior nutrition for home delivered services, the community service options, the waiver for the frail and elderly, and then they also have the national family caregiver supports. There's actual a little bit more of a description in the actual strategic plan document. And then we have this sort of other category, and that other category is really based on eligibility and then funding availability. So folks within any of these target populations could be served if they met eligibility and funding was available. That includes the independent living program, personal assistance services, and then of course, assistive technology supports. So Eli, I see you have your hand up, and then Kimberly, you do as well. What questions do you have for me here?
Hi, thank you, Eli. I'm looking at the graph here, and what I've been educated is I know you had a category of physical disability that includes everything. I understand the hearing, disabled, blind, whatever, but I've been told, like for example, a deaf person is also considered a person with intellectual disability. So I'm wondering if you're doubling up the statistic here, because by being a deaf person, I was told that I have intellectual development because I started later in life, getting language and so forth. So compared to the normal childhood, I was a little later, and I was told by Captain Nielsen, who told me that I am considered disabled. So I just wonder if are you doubling up, or you're looking for something more specific? Because you got to be careful, because I put it to what Captain Nielsen told me, I'm qualified in both categories.
So I think that I'm not clear on your question. What I presented in the document is just how the state system is structured. It's not making any, it's not drawing any conclusions based on that. So I don't, is there a question in there, or are you just making?
Basically, I'm just saying, I'm just concerned that are we doubling up the information here? Because you say each population described the plan include a person with intellectual or developmental disabled, or a person with physical disabled. I qualify in both categories. So can we be, what I'm actually saying, can we be a little bit more specific?
So can we be more specific? And so what I intend
describing what you describing the description of each population.
So I think that part of the challenge is that I couldn't come up with a definition that would make sense for all of the programs. I think that these are general categories, Eli, and maybe it'll become clear when I actually insert in there like what the eligibility requirements are for each of the programs, because you could fall within one of these buckets, but not qualify for a program underneath that bucket. So that's why I put in there, like, I need to add the eligibility information, and then also like the number of people served by each of those programs. So that's the information that I still have to gather and put in the document. So we'll put that in the sort of parking lot issue and come back to it at our next iteration when I have that information in the doc. How does that sound?
I'll wait till you get more information, then we can see whether we need to be more specific or not. Okay.
Yeah, and I don't think, this is really just a matter of helping us understand this is how the current system is structured, so that we can identify this is where we're at, and this is where we want to be. How do we close that gap? So this document is not meant to be like a declarative document. We're going to restructure something. It's really about sort of identifying where we're at, where we want to go, and then the plan that actually will lessen that divide.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Kimberly.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate you giving those descriptors because I seen where Eli was coming from, again, because we're always worried about duplicative services and things like that. So I'm glad you clarified that once we get more descriptors, and I think it'll be more clear. And then the second thing that I was going to chime in on too, I think I probably raised my hand right when you were closing it, is if you need some assistance with accessibility, with graphs and the text and all that, we can go ahead and get a hold of the executive director, Catherine Nielsen. She's pretty familiar with accessibility issues that she can also work with Cindy on in the past on other documents for the DD Council too. So there's just another form of some help if you would like it as well.
Perfect. Yeah, we have like, I have a list of like an accessibility checklist that I go through, and then I run it both on Word as well as the PDF. But sometimes that doesn't tell us like how it actually lands for somebody. And so that's the part that I would love to get feedback from. So I thank you for that, Kimberly. Okay. So just as a reminder, eligibility requirements is the very last sort of bullet on this slide. Eligibility requirements for each of these programs, as well as the number of individuals served, will be inserted into the document if they're available for all of the data. I'm trying to make sure that I have the same data across all the programs, right? So I would have put this in there, and it's part of the reason I didn't put it in there for the congregate versus integrated settings is that we only had partial 2022 data, and I want to make sure that we have a full year because we're comparing it against full year data for other terms. Okay, so any other questions or comments in regards to kind of the way the information is laid out and the data that's in there? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move on. Okay, so after we describe sort of the population of folks in Nevada who have a particular kind of disability, after we describe the system that actually promotes community integration for those folks, then we want to describe, okay, so what does the sort of trend look like when we take a look at congregate versus integrated settings? And we do have that data. I attached this, let me pull it over to the document. And I'm going to offer this with some caution because I think that, and I think Diane, you may have raised this during our first meeting around the cost, like the cost per service is not the best indicator here because there are so many sort of qualifying factors, but I think the numbers served in each of these settings is what's most important. But I wanted to test that with you guys. It's actually the reason that I attached the document itself. I also try to create like a trend line, but because there are such low numbers here, it looked like there were two numbers at the bottom and then just this high number on the top. So I'm trying to brainstorm about the best way to demonstrate this that offers value for you guys, but I did want to test with you. So I'll be populating this section of the report for your review at our next steering committee meeting. But I did want to test with you if you think that there's any value in the cost per, the average cost per person. And then I see, Chuck, you have your hand up.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Because I raised this question at a task force on Alzheimer's disease meeting, and this ADSD staff answered it. So the answer to the question of, and I can't see the larger text, but there really is no accurate comparison here that is being presented between home and community-based services and institutional care. Institutional care, namely nursing home care, is an all-inclusive cost. And so whether you're getting your medical services, your pharmaceutical services, your nursing care, those are paid as an all-inclusive per day payment. However, when they prepared this chart, and this may be different but I think the ADSD staff can answer this. They only looked at the home and community-based services. So let's say, for example, somebody with a physical disability has diabetes, chronic heart disease, and as well as a physical disability, and they're receiving services, medical, physician, pharmaceutical services. None of that is in the cost for that physically disabled person. And so it is not an apples to apples comparison. And so the value it would be if the state were able to calculate the total cost per person on the physical disabilities waiver. So that would include the disability services, in-home care, pharmaceutical, physician, hospital. Then it would be comparable to institutional care. Hopefully that's clear. So the only value, assuming that I'm correct in my description of this, because I had asked the question before, the only value is on unduplicated case counts. So unduplicated persons served would be the only value here, because again, unless the costs are apples to apples, it's really meaningless.
Thank you, Chuck. And so that kind of validates my point about really using the number served alone is what may offer us the most value.
Now, I will say one thing that I told Dina this 3 or 4 years ago. I said, you know, the one thing that I did that I was most proud of was I kept a chart over the 12 years I was a Medicaid administrator of the number of nursing home individuals served on average per month versus HCBS, and also the number of Medicaid bed days, nursing home bed days for nursing homes. And so creating that apples to apples comparison really provided a compelling chart over a 10-year period of the increase in HCBS services versus nursing home services, which is sort of the benchmark for community integration and versus institutional care. So if there is some way for them to get that kind of data, I think it would provide a compelling picture of where the state has been and where it's going with regard to institutional care versus in-home care.
So I can definitely ask if they have that data readily available.
And I can help if you want me to work with the data wonks and you know, to come up with a specific data request.
That would be great. So I'll definitely connect with you, Chuck, to like make sure that I'm asking the right thing. I'm going to test with you. I'm going to go back and listen into this recording, and then I'm going to test with you. Is this the right question to ask? If they don't have that, then I will opt for the number of people served over year, so that hopefully what we see is more people being served by the waiver, less people in institutional care settings. Okay. Let me see, where are we at? I think we've addressed that. Okay, so this is just a preview. So the asset and the gaps in care and the critical issues subsection, which are the two kind of remaining subsections in that situational analysis, will largely be driven by the data that we have yet to collect. So we'll be taking a look at everything that we have so far, in addition to, like I said, the eligibility and the number of people served in each of those programs that ADSD is currently supporting, as well as those cost comparisons for institutional versus waiver-based services. And then we will add on top of that the information we gathered from the UNR survey, the information we're going to gather through the key person interviews, and then the community-based workshops. And all of that will be summarized, trends will be identified, and I will test that with you guys at our next steering committee meeting, which won't be until March, which is yet to be scheduled. I have Corey.
I have a question.
Yes.
On that cost table that you just showed us, is that what the state is paying, or is that total cost? Like maybe there's more than one funder. Like, is that what the state has paid out for those people?
So there is, well, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Cheyenne, and I don't even think that I think it's Jennifer that may be the right person, Jennifer F., who's not here with us today, but My understanding, this is under the institutional care and then the waivers for frail, elderly, and physical disabled. This is state costs, but when you get into here, these are actually state sponsored. When we look at intellectual and developmental disability waiver services, that this is actually state operated institutions and then private care facilities that the state has paid for.
So these are state costs.
State costs, not
They're
always
There's
state.
no federal
sponsored.
component here.
Well, no, there are. So, and again, like I'm not an expert here, so I'll defer to Chuck and Cheyenne, but the federal match, there's when they apply for the waivers, there's a federal component, but then there's also a state match. So it's a combination of both federal and statewide funding. Did I get that right, Chuck and Cheyenne?
Well, I'll need to defer to Cheyenne on the chart, but I think the way it's worded in terms of payment, I think it's the total cost of care, which is that, you know, the federal as well as state share, as well as county share of funding. Yeah. So I think Corey's right, but we need to confirm that.
Okay, that'll be another question that I clarify.
And Lisa,
yeah.
I'm thinking maybe we should jump to the consumer workshops and then the steering committee portion.
That's where we're at right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm like looking at the time. I'm like,
20 minutes. Okay, we're doing it.
Yeah.
All right. So key person interviews, to put this on the fast track. Key person interviews, as I mentioned earlier, are really to help us identify systems issues. So they're systems providers, right? And we're really trying to understand what's working and what's not working at a systems level. The consumer workshops or the community workshops are really to understand what are the needs of the population, what are the barriers to accessing services, and then also like how easy or difficult is it to use the system? So from the consumer perspective. So here are the folks that we have drafted for your reaction. And so as I was sharing with Eli, he hopped on a little bit earlier, we have an allocation for 20 key informant interviews. And so we can swap anyone out here. If you guys have specific individuals that you have in mind, I would ask for you to just put them in the chat and then we can manage that. So Eli, I know you wanted to make a proposal. This is what I would offer just from a process perspective. If there's somebody you want to add, then tell me who you want to take away. Right? So, so we can't go past 20. 20 is our limit. So you have to give and take here. Eli, are you ready?
Yes, I would like to propose to include the Nevada Commission for the person who are deaf, hard of hearing, and speech impaired. Sorry about that. I think they are a unique group that need additional accommodation, and I think it would be to our advantage to find out exactly what are the barriers, what are the needs of the deaf community. They're a very interesting community, and I hate for us to miss that out. And they're quite vocal about the discrimination. So we want to make sure we're all inclusive, but I cannot tell you who to kick out. That I cannot tell you. I mean, Cheyenne would be the best one to tell you which one to kick out.
Oh, you're breaking the rules, Eli. You're breaking the rules. Okay.
That's my middle name.
Okay, I'm gonna put them. I can't do that. So a proposal on the table is to add the Commission on Deaf and Hard of Hearing as a key informant. I would offer that in understanding like what the needs of that population are, I think that we'll get that more through the community workshops. Once we look at the areas of exploration, you'll see that we're really looking at systems issues there, which they could very well be able to speak to as an advocacy group. Corey and then Diane.
Hey, thank you. I only count 19.
There's a couple that I had to double up. So Northern Nevada and Southern Nevada Independent Living Centers are actually two orgs. So you guys could opt for one or the other. You feel like that organization is going to be represented, and then Clark and Washoe County are also 2 orgs.
Oh, I see what you've done.
Yeah.
Okay, now is the Northern Nevada and Southern Nevada Independent Living Centers different than the Southern Nevada Independent Living Center? Are those?
That would be,
Oh, maybe I made a mistake on here. Let me pull the actual form up. That might have been a mistake on my part, Corey. Thank you for catching it. So you can see, maybe this is a better visual because I can actually adjust this. So we have the Office of Education, the Department of Employment Training and Rehab, DHHS, Aging and Disability Services, DPBH, Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy. So that's 3, 4, 5. So we've got 5 here. Community-based service providers, Northern, Southern, Clark, Washoe, Nevada PEP, Southern Health District, and Life Care Planning, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then advocacy groups, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
So who's not on the other one? Oh, that's so funny. There we
Okay,
go.
1, 2,
I
3,
get to-
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But that does take us to 21. But here's where you guys get to tell me like who you think can best provide us with the information. Let me quickly go to the areas of exploration so that you guys can see what we're actually searching for, because I think that these 2 probably need to be held in tandem. So areas of exploration for those key person interviews, to what extent do you and your team members understand the Olmstead decision and how that information and how is that information used within your organization? What programs, policies, and procedures are in place or being proposed within your organization that promote and facilitate services in the most integrated setting? What is being done within your organization to ensure services that support community integration are person-centered and high quality? To what extent are state systems, counties, and community providers working together to support community integration efforts? What are the pain points and what is working well? In a recent study conducted by UNR, it was found that there's a stark contrast between service barriers perceived by professionals and people with lived experiences. What do you ascribe this contrast to? If you could identify the most critical systems issue that needs to be addressed to better support community integration, what would it be? How would you suggest solving for that issue? And then are there specific geographical considerations that need to be taken into account when providing services that promote community integration? So again, you can see here that I try to take both areas of exploration that we've used in the past, but also recommendations that came out of that UNR survey to really understand kind of how folks are functioning in an environment at a systems level to support community integration. So this is the context. These are the organizations. Would anyone like to weigh in on one or the other? Diane, I see your hand up, and then we'll follow that with Chuck and Julie.
I actually think you could take the NSED, the Nevada Center for Excellence in Disabilities, off of the ad, because that is me. We are the group that did the survey. And so I think our voice is well represented. I also could take those questions, Lisa, if it would be helpful for you, and answer them in writing and give that to you, so you don't have to, you know, use us as one of your 20.
and this is,
Lisa, this is Kimberly. The Nevada Partners in Policymaking is part of the Governor's Council, so you can remove that as well too, and we can navigate the council as well as the policy if that's okay with everyone else too.
Which organization was that? I'm sorry.
So I'm with the Governor's Council on Developmental Disabilities, and one of our programs is the Partners in Policymaking course. So we can highlight both if you'd like under the council itself.
Got it. So it was this one, and what was the second one? I'm sorry.
The
This one, right?
Nevada Partners in Policymaking, yes.
Okay.
and this is Cheyenne. I wonder, to Diane's point, because we have representatives from the Governor's Council and from the commission on the steering committee, if we should take them off the list for the interviews? Is there other groups, advocacy groups that we may want to target?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So Cheyenne, real quick before you guys answer that. So because the council has some of the entities that you already have consistently on here, the only other difference is we do have council members that may not fit in the categories you have here. So would you prefer that we use council members for the DD Council and the Partners in Policy Making course? Because again, that's state wide. That's not just one area of demographics either. So if since we're sitting on the commission, if you want me to do it kind of what Diane is doing internally, and then you guys can open that spot if that's the differentiate that you guys prefer to take.
I'm just asking the question. I don't personally have a strong opinion, but I was just kind of going along with Diane's line of thinking there with the INSEAD, so.
And this is Kimberly again for the record. So I'm not sure, Nevada Disability Law Center, are you asking them to distribute that through their list? And the reason I'm asking that is because I believe that they have oversight for some of aging and disability. So I'm not sure where that line would be drawn. If you're asking, so are you asking them to throw that out there and then submit those questions out to their listserv, or what role would they play?
No, so it would be a matter of actually just interviewing somebody within that organization. So that's what this is about. It's not,
Okay.
It's going to be key informant interviews with individuals. And we're really going to try to stick to the script so that we get the same kind of information from everybody.
Okay. So then I would get clarification, since they have oversight of some of the programs for aging, if that would even be applicable. And then that obviously that would, if it isn't, then that would be another open spot. But I see where Cheyenne's going with the DD Council possibly being left off. If you're going to take the council off as a whole, then I would reiterate maybe possibly the Partners in Policy Making course, because those would be the individuals that are taking that course that you would want to get that information from.
Okay, so just to clarify, the Nevada Partners in Policy Making is your preference over the DD Council because they're already represented on this group and there's some crossover there. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. And now that you've
Then-
clarified that one step further, the Partners in Policy Making course would be good. There's about 20 individuals. So you would get a better outreach of opinion that way than if you were to use the council, because a good chunk of them are already state affiliated mandatory seats. So you would lose the voice because there's only a quarter of the group that would be self-advocates and family members. So you would get a better outcome with the partners.
And I want to just make sure that everyone understands we're going to be reaching out to individuals. It's not, they're not going to like have the questions and then like take it to their group and come back with a sort of consensus based answer to the questions. It's really about taking an individual's experience. And that's why we're doing so many of them, the 20, to get an understanding and to see if there are themes across systems that we need to address. And the consumer voice is really meant to be heard through both the survey that was already conducted as well as the community-based workshops. Because I tried to actually extract from what we heard in the survey, what the results said in the survey, and try to dig a little bit deeper in those areas that we think still exist from the 2016 plan. Okay. So we've got a number of hands up. I don't remember who I said would go next, so I'm just going to go at the top of my list, Chuck, and then Julie, Corey, and then Eli.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I would agree with Kimberly. I don't think the Nevada Disability Advocacy and Law Center represents, I mean, they're an organization that provides service and have clients, but I don't think they, represent necessarily the voice of an individual who's lived experience. Likewise, I mean, if you are looking for industry input, then certainly the Personal Care Association of Nevada and the Group Home Association are appropriate. But if you're looking for, the lived experience of residents and people receiving services, then that wouldn't be appropriate. And so, and if, again, if you do want to include industry representatives, then you might have to add one. For example, the Nevada Healthcare Association, which is the association of nursing homes in Nevada. But again, It depends on the purpose of your outreach to advocacy groups, whether you're looking for somebody who's using the services and can provide that context, or you're looking for industry representation.
So it's really about anyone who can offer us a systems level perspective. And sometimes that comes from advocacy groups because they understand the system so well because they're advocating within it. And sometimes it is like a service provider. So this is really where you guys are steering me. This is just an initial list that I drafted and I vetted through ADSD, but ultimately you guys tell me who you think is best to gather this kind of information from.
So again, I would throw out there that if you are looking for industry voices, then the Nevada Healthcare Association would be appropriate, because they also have a charge to develop services within the context of their institutions, their institutional members,
right,
that are community integrated. And so, they can't just put somebody in a room and call it good. So, again, I mean, I think it's really up to this group in terms of, how much of a voice do you want to give the industry versus individuals with lived experience.
Okay, thank you, Chuck. I've added them, and I want to clarify, the Nevada Healthcare Association is different than the Personal Care Association, correct?
Yes, the Nevada Healthcare Association is the association of nursing homes, skilled nursing facilities, and intermediate care facilities in Nevada.
Perfect. Thank you, Chuck. Okay, Julie. Julie, you're on mute. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I couldn't get it quick enough. I added Raquel in the chat with Client Connect. She's also a consumer.
Oh, are you saying Raquel?
Yeah. She's been an excellent person. And one more quick comment. I don't know why, but the word integrated is bugging me. I wish we could replace integrated with inclusive.
Oh, are you talking about the question?
Yeah, just you use the word integrated, and I think a better word choice would be inclusive. That's just my opinion.
Okay. So I'm acutely aware of our time. We've got 5 minutes left and we need to finalize at least the organizations. And I would like to get from you guys, I'd like to vet the locations of those community workshops, because I need to work with ADSD to actually get a site and then start to promote those and schedule those for you guys. So can we, I have a proposal. I can actually send out a follow-up email that lists all of the organizations, and can each person respond to me with what their individual sort of opt-in or opt-out options are. And then I will collect that from each of you guys. If you have nothing to weigh in, then you can say, Lisa, I don't have anything to weigh in, and we'll opt for those people who want to weigh in. And then I will finalize the list with ADSD. If I don't have a name, so here's the qualifier. If I don't have a name, then what we talked about doing with the ADSD folks is to offer the option to the organization to self-select who they think would be best suited to answer the questions. We will send the questions in advance and then we will schedule them. So if you guys have a specific request, we want this organization and this is the person who we think is best suited to do so, then please offer that in the email communications that I'll use to follow this up. If you have any suggested changes to the questions, please offer that in the email as well, because I think I have to skip now and get to the community workshops so that we can get those on the books for you guys. So the community workshops, we have 8, and here's kind of a list that, again, we just drafted for your reaction. Reno, Fallon, Elko, Mesquite, 2 in Vegas, Winnemucca, and Pahrump. Anybody want to make any suggested changes to the locations? Eli? And then Kimberly.
Yes, this is Eli. I don't know why you have Mesquite included in there because it's a bedroom community in Las Vegas. If they want to come to Vegas to talk, they're not gonna find many people living in Mesquite unless I'm mistaken.
It was just a suggestion, so we can.
I know, I think you don't
So-
need to Mesquite, Pahrump, yes.
Okay, so that leaves 1 additional location to identify. Kimberly?
Lisa, this is Kimberly. So Mesquite actually has a really great population, and they actually have a lot of individuals with young families as well as the senior community. So often Mesquite's not talked about enough, and it is about an hour and a half to almost 2 hours, depending how far you're getting in to Mesquite. So it might be a good opportunity because you might get people to come in from Logandale and Moapa. So you might have a broader reach because that community is very involved. They show up for everything. Where you might, even though they're part of Clark County. So I'm not too sure how you guys would be able to break that up, but I think it would be a missed opportunity to remove Mesquite because Mesquite is usually left out because they do always have to drive into Vegas. So you lose a handful of people due to transportation to be able to reach that.
Okay, thank you. How about Corey?
I just wanted to keep Mesquite. I put it in the chat.
Okay. Julie, and then we'll go to Cindy. Oh, you're on mute, Julie.
Sorry,
That's okay.
there was a concern expressed at our council meeting. There's still individuals who are medically fragile. And the question was, can we do it with Zoom?
Can we do it? I missed the last part.
Via Zoom?
Oh, via Zoom?
Because there's individuals who are medically fragile who cannot leave. That was expressed at the last NVC meeting.
I mean, that is an option, is that we actually could do one virtually, via Zoom, and then you capture not just the medically fragile population, but anyone in the balance of the state where we're not. If we were to do that, would you suggest maybe removing one of the Las Vegas locations because we do have Mesquite?
Yeah, I think it could.
Okay. Julie.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Cindy.
Yes, I'm going to repeat what Julie said because at the Silk meeting, there was a resounding, loud expression that they wanted it to be Zoom. And if it's only one opportunity, I guess it's got to be one opportunity. But having planned meetings for my whole life, I think there should be 2 opportunities at least of Zoom, or they be hybrid. And I think as we move forward, this is kind of a CDC thing. We're seeing more increases in COVID, and I think people are going to be less interested in going to crowded meetings, particularly when you got people with disabilities who have comorbidity and maybe fragile to certain disorders or transportation. My transportation is not very good unless my husband takes me. So it was really pretty loud. Julie's being very gentle, and I'm just coming on and letting you know it was very loud. They want Zoom. They'd like actually hybrid. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And I actually think if we're saving on the travel and going to, Las Vegas only once, like potentially we could do 2 Zooms and bump it up to, instead of doing 8, doing 9. So I think that is something that I'm completely open to doing.
Can we not do it hybrid though? I mean,
hybrid gets a little bit more difficult because it requires technology and it requires multiple facilitators. And so my preference would be all virtual, all in person. I think it'll be a more effective way to share information.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else want to weigh in, or are you guys okay with the remaining locations? Okay, then how about the actual areas of exploration? So this is what we intend, and this is like a balancing act. Like, I know we want to know a lot, right? But this is, again, let's take the Goldilocks approach here, because we already have some really good information. We have the UNR survey, which I'm actually building off of. And we do have the 2016 plan that we know many of those things still exist. So I actually pulled from those to craft these ideas in terms of areas of exploration. We want to understand how, to the extent that people understand the Olmstead decision, because that was one of the things that we saw in the UNR surveys, that a lot of folks don't even know what it is and what it means to them. So to what extent do people with lived experiences and their family members understand the Olmstead decision is the question we've crafted there. What is their understanding of the services that are available? To what extent do people with lived experience and their family members know about services that provide community integration supports? Where do PLEs and family members get their information? Like, if this is going to be an action plan, right, we want to hear from them, like, where do you actually find things out so that we can leverage that? What should the state do to make sure information is readily available about the services that are available through ADSD? And you can see here that we would actually test the options offered through the UNR survey to include, this is what folks said, distribution of flyers, emails, newsletters, as well as the use of billboards. Other ideas to test with workshop participants would be whether or not information is adequately shared through service providers such as schools, regional centers, and both rehab, in addition to whether or not that information is plain and in accessible formats. Services most needed to support community integration. What services are most needed to ensure community integration, or the phrase going from Julie's, I can actually change integration to the other word that she offered, integration opportunities. Are there geographical considerations that we should be aware of? Barriers to accessing community-based supports. What are the primary barriers to accessing community-based supports? And there's some information that we can leverage from UNR. Lack of available transportation, lack of affordable and accessible housing, inadequate employment supports and opportunities, and then lack of specific services. And then how easy or difficult is it to navigate the service system? And so that's the areas. Are these the right areas of exploration, folks? Is there anything that we're missing? Julie, I see your thumbs up. I love the use of the emojis. Diane, I see your hand up. What are your thoughts?
I'm thinking adding some more open-ended question about, if they had the magic wand, what would they add that would, improve their capacity, or maybe it's their community's capacity for inclusive opportunities.
I love the magic.
Or what question did we not ask? Something along those lines.
Okay. Corey?
I'd like to know where they heard about the services. So if they do have services, where they hear about them, was their first contact through school or was their first contact through some nonprofit? I think it would help to
Do
identify.
you think that it would be different than this question? Where do people with lived experiences and family members get information? Like, is it different than that, or is it a rephrasing issue, you think?
I guess where they first got information, like once you're into this system, you kind of, I guess that question makes me think that they're already in the system.
Hmm.
Where do they get information now moving forward now that they're in the system? I guess I was just thinking when they first got services, what was their first door that they went through, or who guided them down the right path? I guess. That's what I want to know. Was it an agency? Is it a state agency? Was it a school district? Was it a nonprofit? Who's out there doing the legwork that's hooking people up with services?
Other moms.
Probably.
Is it word of mouth? Let's idea it, and maybe that is something we could address.
One of the things that
I
I
put
am,
something else.
yeah, so one of the things I'm always aware of is that we have to be very focused with our questions, because we can't go any more than 90 minutes with a workshop, right? So I'm just thinking that there may be one of the things I've done where we've had more questions than we've had time is to have them actually complete on the sign-in sheet, or like give them a sign-in sheet where they provide us with their own specific information. And so that may be something that I can do on like a sheet that says, where did you get this, right? And then have them actually fill that out, like carve out 5 minutes at the very beginning, please fill this out. And then it actually gives them the opportunity to like weigh in on the questions, because some folks feel more comfortable writing than they even do like talking. So I think that I can figure that out, and I'll use a combined approach there. It'll be something that I have to be able to do on Zoom also, but we have like Zoom questions that we can ask. It'll be check the box, but I can do that. I see the comments, Kimberly, about asking them in plain questions. I do intend to like use the questions here. So if you have any specific language, like soften this up, Lisa, that is not one of my strong suits. I'll just tell you that. So I will test with some of my other team members, like, is this written in plain language? But again, you can offer any suggestions about language changes. It's just not one of the things that I do very well. I do a lot of things well, but that's not one of them. Corey.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Sorry.
Okay. I think that I've got what I need from you guys, and I appreciate those that were able to hang in there with me for an additional 10 minutes. Just from a wrap-up standpoint, let me go here. What are we doing next? So I will distribute. I'm going to craft that status report template, send it out to you guys. I welcome feedback about whether or not it actually serves its purpose. The purpose is to sort of keep all of your constituencies and your communities engaged and informed about the process and the decisions made, kind of where we're at and how they can engage. So if I don't hit the mark, please provide me with feedback about how I can do better. We will work with ADSD to identify the locations. It'll likely be in an ADSD like ADRC or state-based center, because it's accessible oftentimes, and they'll have the technology that we need to promote the work. I will create, as soon as we have the locations finalized and the dates, a flyer that I will distribute far and wide to you guys, but I really am depending upon the steering committee and ADSD listservs to push out this information. I will do all the work in terms of like, the flyer, showing up, facilitating the conversations and documenting them, but I'm relying upon you to get the word out. You guys did a really great job around the study session, so I have no doubt that you guys will also be effective in this. And then the remaining steering committee meetings. So here's my question for you guys is, when I've sent out doodle polls to get some things scheduled, there hasn't been a great response. So I tend to just sort of choose a date. Is there a way other than doodle that I can best schedule all of our remaining meetings? Or do you guys feel like Doodle is the best way? And then I just reach out to folks who that may not be very, I think Cindy, I always reach out and give it to her kind of in plain text format so she doesn't have to manage the technology component. I could actually do that in both for everybody. But does that seem like the best way, or are there other ways that you, yeah, I see Corey, you're going, yeah, that's the best way to do it. All right, then I will actually follow up this week to try to get all of our remaining meetings on the schedule. Just to note, we won't have a February meeting because I'm going to be traveling the state, doing all these community workshops and interviewing folks. So no meeting in February, but we will meet probably late to mid-March, because after I collect all that information, I have to summarize it and then identify themes for your reaction. I do want to just say in closing now that it is my sincerest hope and wish and priority to get meeting materials to you guys 5 days in advance of our meeting. I didn't meet the mark this time, and I apologize for that, but I am hopeful that if we can get these things scheduled in advance, that I can work towards those deadlines in a much more proactive fashion. So that will be my goal moving forward. Any final thoughts before we wrap this one up, team? Thank you, Eli. Then it'll probably be after March 24th, because we want to make sure you're here. And that gives me more time to manage the data. So that's good.
Thank you very much. I think it was a very productive meeting.
All right, guys. Well, thank you.
Lisa, this is Kimberly really quick. Can you just confirm with us too via email whether or not after you've had a chat with aging, if they feel that the DD Council, NDLC and the USAID are still viable, or are we allowed to maybe do, as Diana said, off the record one and allow an open space for others? Because there was something in the chat. I just want to make sure we're not missing, or at least the DD Council isn't missing something if you're choosing to use the partners. So if you can just answer that via email, that's totally fine. Or I can at least chime in with you and then we can follow back.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to send up as a follow-up, like I'm asking everyone to weigh in if they'd like here's the list that we've developed. We need to whittle it down to 20. Any final recommendations, as well as weighing in on the questions. After I get folks' response, then I'll test it with ADSD. It may work itself out. And if it does, I will communicate that to the whole group.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right, folks, then I will give you the rest of your Wednesday back. Thank you so much. If there's anything in between now and the next time we get together, please feel free to reach out to me. Chuck, I will be reaching out to you just to confirm the right questions that I need to pose to Medicaid. All right. Thank you, team. I appreciate you. Bye-bye. Hey, Margaret. Oh my gosh. Hold on just a sec.